Well, Arabic is always a challenge to define as a region because it is several regions in one. And so on one hand you have, the Eastern European region moving into the Balkans, finally going to Central Asia. So I would state first that in Eastern Europe and the Balkans to a large degree, the role of the private sector historically has always been very strong. There's a long history, there's a tradition, and that tradition has come back very strong and very solid in the last 20 years. And I believe that it is a major force for the positive change in the region. In Central Asia, it's a different equation. It's an equation where it's a new private sector being created, as well as in countries like Belarus. And so there, the private sector is still living within a very subservient level to government, I think, in many of these countries. And the historic hostility, which we have to understand for the whole region, because of the system that has been abandoned, and now the new system places the dynamic very complex and often wrong. And let me be clear. I think the region has suffered from a very peculiar phenomena whereby it has gone from the controlled state economy, and I say it's gone beyond market. It's gone to Milton Friedman, basically, in the sense that there is an extreme of market orientation, which we know the crisis that exists today, that markets are not truly self-regulating. And so the institutions required by government to make the kind of markets that can work for everybody are still not there. And hopefully with the wave of reforms and some called re-regulation that's occurring after the crisis that's affected the world, these kinds of things will change. At the same time, my only hope is that in Central Asia, the private sector will be seen as the engine for growth, as I think it is in some of the countries, but not all. Well, I think the best thing we can do is to use the instruments we have, and I think I would mention Global Compact as being one, which is a way of giving the private sector a community with the UN, UNDP, and other agencies, of course, and for us to be celebrating where the private sector is working well and why it's working well, and to be analyzing why it isn't, where it isn't. And that's because of our neutrality. We're not the World Bank or the IFC or even USAID or DFID, all of whom have massive and major programs for building private sector. But we do have an honest broker analysis of what is going on in the region, and using that in as many ways as we can. I think what we can say is that the crisis is affecting, will affect, and it makes what we do more important. And there are a couple of different angles. Hopefully, with private sector crisis, the reaction to the crisis, and it's not going to be the same reaction as it is like in the West, because in the West, you have a set of institutions, particularly in the financial sector, which made the market lose its credibility. And even now, I did hear in Bulgaria from some politicians who still believe in the old system that, the crisis was a vindication for their belief that the whole thing was wrong anyway. So the challenge will be to not let the crisis create a confusion about the direction that a country should be going in, and to be the intermediator of information and experiences from around the world, where the private sector is surviving the crisis and why it is, and what are the policies that are best suited for it. So it increases our challenge, UNDP, but it also should be able to allow for better reforms in many ways. Basically, I think we have the potential to have more impact than we've had in the past. And my key objective, and if you divide our work, one side of our work is engagement with private sector, and the other is private sector development, which I would say more in the policy services. But on this area, we're far too fragmented, and we need to integrate the work of the Growing Inclusive Markets Initiative, which, as you know, attempts to build the empirical base about what I would call the new market economy, in terms of showing how core business of all sides of companies can interface, affect positively the poor, and the validity of the poor as a market and as a full participant. In that we have growing sustainable business, which is a very ambitious instrument which we've had for 6 years, which has had some real level of success. And I'm very hopeful that there is a way in which the richness of the experience of Jim and the knowledge can be applied in GSB, which today they've never been. And to be specific, I think that when growing sustainable business is undertaken, it shouldn't be done before something like, and I was talking with David Wheeler, some form of Jim analysis of the potential and the opportunities in the marketplace of those countries that want to do GSB, which maybe I should say GSB is the brokering between for-profit companies and opportunities, which means UNDP playing a convening role of all the stakeholders, from the community to the government to the private sector, to ensure that new investments are made that make these untapped areas and possibilities, which in the future I believe will be driven either on an area development idea or regional or territoire, as you say, or terroir, I think you say, or through a value chain or sector concept. On the side of policy, we have to boost our services in that sense, and we will be reviewing and renewing what those services are. And of course, all of this has to tie in together.